Hello everyone and welcome back to Sadaya Dانشجو. My name is Ryan Thekrat.
My name is Melody Shadanlu.
My name is Nora Safadi.
And today we have another guest for you all. I hope that you can take away and learn from this guest as much about yourself and your spirituality as I have. This is Dr. Kaveh Nawab. Dr. Kaveh Nawab is a UCLA and Cedars-Sinai trained cardiac anesthesiologist and Cedars-Sinai assistant professor with interest in unlocking individual potential through weaponizing, and I mean this in a positive sense, neuroscience. From his clinical work to his efforts as a life coach, Dr. Nawab has nourished the seed of medicine and public health, improving not just the lives of the individual, but the lives of the collective through powerful mental and physical sciences and tools. Thank you for coming on the show, Dr. Nawab.
My pleasure, everyone. Thanks for having me today.
Okay, well, let's just get right into our first question. So, first formal question for you, Dr. Nawab. So, on this show, we have a target audience of pre-meds, medical students, young clinicians who might especially benefit from this type of information. So, for our younger listeners, please, if you would, put on your medical school interview cap. Hopefully one last time. God bless. Dr. Nawab, why medicine? Many follow-up. Why did you choose medical school as an adjunct with and without professionalism in your life? Has anything changed from before you started medical school to now? And on the topic of what you think is worth doing in life. So in other words, would you recommend to your younger self to go into medicine, and why medicine?
Well, thanks for asking.
Yeah.
I think the bottom line is open doors. What you want, if you're thinking about this how I do, is opportunities. The point of education, the point of training, discipline, delayed gratification, all of it has to do with opportunities, building on what you were given by the sacrifices of the people who came before you, be those your parents, be those the people of your country, etc. So for me, medicine was an unambiguous good. The major downside is just the investment of time and money that it takes. But ultimately, it's taking care of people in a way that is rewarding and uncontroversial. There's one way to think about it, like doctors are addressing disease. They're not addressing problematic people per se. Firemen are also addressing a natural disaster like a fire, whereas attorneys are addressing problematic people, which can be difficult sometimes for people, and also police officers, they're addressing problematic people. So on one side you have medicine and, for instance, firefighting, and on one side you have law and law enforcement. I'm personally a recovering people pleaser, and so confronting people about their misbehavior is a challenge for me, whereas confronting some disease process was something that I could swallow more easily. You could say that both law and medicine leave many doors open, and you can go from both of those things to a variety of other endeavors in life. But personally, I had already started in life sciences. I was a neuroscience major at UCLA. That came out of my interest in meditation, decision-making, behavioral economics, all of which then led to trying to understand how we work, how the mind works, how the heart works, and how the nervous system embodied in the tissues of the human ultimately end up having a very large effect on the outcome of a person's life. Medicine seemed like a natural progression from that work I did in neuroscience, and it's been very good to me. As far as professionalism, I think it's an interesting way to ask the question. You know, it's a thing. Professionalism is a thing. It's a non-binary thing. You can have more of it or less of it in your life. But I think the beauty of it is it puts a high standard on a person. Professionals make promises. Professionals endeavor to deliver on those promises and make sacrifices of their own convenience in order to be there for other people, their customers, their clients, their patients. So a professional is not universal. Many people are not professionals. You can have work without being a professional, but it's just a higher standard of reliability and deliverables that a professional promises. And there's this one connection I can't get rid of in my mind where the word sacrifice is related to the word sacred. So often business is considered to be something dirty or bad. And there are reasons for that historically, but I think ultimately it's a disempowering view because service is sacred, sacrifice is at the heart of service, and there's no reason that we can't enjoy being of service to each other, being used by each other. That word doesn't have to be a bad word. And so I think people who go into life sciences, health sciences, medicine, nursing, and all that become very valuable, become useful. And that could come from potentially a insecurity. A person could want to be useful because they feel like they have to justify their existence, but it can also come from a real enjoyment of seeing people feel better, think better if you're a teacher. And so medicine has given me a lot of opportunity to enjoy all those sorts of domains I just covered.
Perhaps, it's almost like I'm seeking now. So because I admire you, I look up to your way of thinking, among others. I want you to persuade people like myself. Perhaps I'm wrong in interpreting what you're saying, but I take it that you see uniqueness in the individual. Okay, uniqueness in the professional within a field, within the domain of medicine. So correct my way of thinking, or not, that I think that medical professionals are replaceable. Maybe it's overly pessimistic, or maybe I'm just misinformed and I'm removed from your career. Not there yet. Why, if I am, let's say I'm in administration, let's take the demonstrative approach. I'm in administration and I need to cut someone or I want to replace someone. I can just get someone with equal training and it is of no consequences, of no difference to me. In that sense, is it valid or no? What do you think about that?
That's a great question, and I don't think we have AI on the agenda, but it's relevant to this question.
Oh man, AI is on my agenda all the time.
Good. It should be. It should be on everyone's. Everything is relative. So is replaceability. And so, like I said earlier, the motivation for formalized advanced training could certainly be insecurity, recognition of our replaceability as high school graduates, our decreased replaceability as college graduates, decreased replaceability progressively as our training progresses. Now, AI is obviously a problem for people who don't want to change and don't want to contend with the reality of evolution. But that's again why I think keeping as many doors open as possible is smart. One thing that one of my mentors said is that do whatever you can to make sure that your boss is not less intelligent than you. I think that's a very good piece of advice because it's very frustrating if you're smarter than your boss, but because of their credentials, they outpace you in the workplace and in the economic race. So this question of how replaceable a person is non-binary, it's relative, and it does end up being a matter of an individual proclivity and prerogative, how much they want to distinguish themselves from the collective. Mm-hmm. And I remember in college when I was choosing neuroscience, I remember very distinctly being worried that certain fields would make me more of an automaton, more of a robot, less socially aware and less emotionally attuned than others. I ended up deciding that neuroscience was a good balance. I would not do it on my own, whereas psychology and sociology, I'd be happy to read books in my free time. But it wasn't quite, engineering or computer programming, which were two of the ones that I thought might dangerously alienate me from people and social circles. So I think your point is well taken, and it's something everyone's going to have to contend with, not just physicians.
Okay. A part of searching for yourself is also giving validity to your own desires, right? That, it's okay to pursue self-actualization both in the eyes of myself, but also like for my purpose, perhaps from the perspective of an admissions committee to medical school.
Exactly.
So that, I can pursue that gradual step ladder. At the same time, what would you say to those who, yes, they have the proclivity to pursue normativity and complacency? Do you think that it's facultative? Do you think that it is necessarily that they should be malleable for self-improvement always? When do you say that it's okay to stop on the step ladder? It's entirely preference?
Yeah, we have this word signals or signs or voices. They say, listen to the signs in your life. And it doesn't have to be a superstitious kind of piece of advice. Your life does include your emotions. It does include the impressions that other people have of you. And there is this tension we were talking about before the camera started rolling, about the prior guest talking about taking time for yourself. There is a tension between service to others and betrayal of yourself. Because if you sacrifice your own preferences and don't stand up for yourself, and like I described earlier, being a people pleaser, then you can't help but eventually build up resentment, regret, and bitterness, which can build up over years if you don't have a kind of sensitivity to it and a way to resolve it through what you're describing, which is essentially indulgence in being yourself without challenging yourself to be different or grow. And so many people have a hard time with cognitive dissonance.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, holding two ideas in mind at once. But the good news is we have many examples in nature, just in our own skulls, of a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere who operate quite differently in a way that is conserved throughout not just the human species, but the animal kingdom as well, that can work in concert with each other. But we all know what it means to have internal conflict. We also know what it means for there to be conflict between people and between groups. When we elevate and integrate from a competitive state of mind, which is necessary, because competitive and competent have a same root. And if you want to become more competent, it helps to compete in order to develop your abilities. But one thing that we can bring it back to the medical school discussion about is, in school, we had something called gunners. Gunners had a reputation for being mercenaries, and they would do whatever it took to make the grade and make others look bad and stuff like that. The good news is, in medicine, the level of consciousness is rising so that that's less of an issue than, for instance, in law school. And when you go into medical school, the school does everything it can to help you graduate. Whereas from what I understand, last I checked in law school, there is an expected attrition rate every year. They expect people to drop out or fail out every year of law school. So it's a very different mentality. And so this question of how much to simply be yourself versus how much to conform to, say, others' expectations of you and their sense that you should be giving more of yourself, including challenging your own beliefs and upgrading your operating systems, is definitely a personal choice. And it largely depends on, like you said, your heart's desire. It's really quite mathematical. You have to make sacrifices or pay in certain ways in order to get certain outcomes, probabilistically. And so there will be a kind of change necessary in your behavior, in your thinking, in your conduct with others, if you want to increase the probability of specific outcomes, like approval from, say, an admissions director or a friend or a possible romantic partner. So this is not something you can really escape, this tension between wanting to just stay how you are and run the programming that you currently have, versus changing how you think, how you are, how you relate to people in order to have different outcomes in life. The last thing I'll say is that changing of how you relate to people can be done on a superficial level, which ends up being attractive in the short term, but ultimately deceptive, or on a deeper level where you do actually change in such a way that makes you more attractive and more valuable.
Okay. To add to that, I caution those who trivialize the complexity of others. When you trivialize the complexity of others, it tends to reflect in a sort of apathy towards humanity and human consciousness. Reflect on instead your own culpability in that process.
Right.
And again, just try to better yourself. People are complex. If you disregard the complexity of somebody else, it reflects in eventually you internalizing that aspect of humans, generalizing that. You may internalize that to yourself, that you are not complex, and not give yourself the same cadence that you deserve, that you should. So on to the next question. I'm nerding out. See, this is a really invaluable conversation.
Yeah.
This is what the program should be, and it's what people need to hear. So moving on. So, Dr. Nawab, when you were in medical school, how did you decide that anesthesiology and furthermore cardiac anesthesiology was in the cards for you? So kind of steering us more back to the medical school discussion. What was the committed step, and what information, as it's useful, as it increases cultural capacities, cultural knowledge to our listeners, helped to inform those decisions? What informed your decision to go into your specific career in medicine?
I'm glad to be answering this because it's tough in medical school to make this decision. There's so many things on your plate, and you're asked to make decisions that are going to affect the rest of your life with very low levels of available bandwidth. So I think the more our audience has an opportunity to think about this in a systematic way before they get to medical school, or just as early as possible, the better. So I can share things that I went through, but also things I've learned since that if I had learned earlier may have affected things one way or the other. I think the first thing to consider is once you're in medical school, you want to decide, do I like clinical work? Am I going to go into patient care? Because there are other alternatives, things like industry and consulting. Those are all available for people with our level of training.
Right, often looked over.
Once you decide, yes, exactly. And people who are in medical schools don't tend to have gone down that path, and so they're not going to be necessarily advertising or advocating for those alternative
I don't
options.
think I've ever met someone who's defaulted to consulting as their desired career path with medicine. It's usually that they go through the system and then they are turned towards that answer, either turned off from something one way or another.
Yeah, I think ChatGPT and Grok and AI in general is very helpful in this way because you can start just asking it questions that it has no bias about in terms of, hey, listen, I have an MD, I'm deciding or I'm getting my MD, deciding between going into clinical care versus alternatives. Give me all the alternatives. And it'll just list it out for you without any kind of bias one way or the other. But let's say, since this was, what I did, and so I can't really speak to the other, you decide on clinical medicine. The first bifurcation or dichotomy would be whether you're interested in diagnostics or intervention. So again, this is non-binary, but there are some fields that are heavily diagnostic and minimally interventional. And some fields which are heavily interventional, they obviously have to have diagnostics because as you're intervening, you're also the diagnostician to some degree, but there are some fields that are extremely interventional. So that's one thing. Do you like working with your hands? Do you like actually intervening on a disease process? Or are you more comfortable or happy sitting back and studying things and coming up with an answer, even if there's not much you can do about that answer? Some people will be okay with that. Some people will feel like it's frustrating. The next bifurcation, there's only two, is whether you want to be the primary team, whether you want to carry a team of patients and then call in consultants for them to opine on specialty-specific organ malfunctions that you'll then be coordinating for your primary patients, or if you want to be one of those consultants. So the first dichotomy is distinction between intervention and diagnostics, and the second one is whether you are where you have a primary team, or whether you hold the role of a consultant. The next thing I would say is look at the people. The people you get along with are likely to be the people who had the same kind of personality. If they're enjoying the field, then you'll enjoy the field. For me, I got along with anesthesiologists very well. I never would have expected to get into anesthesiology before doing my clerkships. I was very interested in behavior, so I was moving towards psychiatry. It so happens that my psychiatry rotation wasn't great, and so anesthesia was a huge surprise for me. But the thing that happened was that I suddenly realized as I was standing back there how much knowledge and information can be hidden in plain sight if you don't know how to look at it. And I really was attracted to that immediate resolution of all those lines on the monitor, all those pieces of data that come flooding into the anesthesiologist's purview. The person who taught me was able to very quickly help me get my footing. So I went from knowing nothing about what was going on to being able to quickly triage what the most important pieces of information were, what to do about them. And so it felt like a cliche we use is flying a plane. You look at that huge control panel with all those buttons, switches, and dials, but over time, it becomes muscle memory. And that was the feeling I really loved, of feeling myself getting better at something in real time. Over the course of minutes, hours, days, I gained familiarity, expertise, and mastery in a way that was very fulfilling. And so I could continue, but I'll say those three things: the dichotomies, the people, and how well you get along with them, and then finally, how you feel doing the work itself.
Dr. Navab, thank you for all the insight that you provided in this episode. I'm being told we're running out of time. Maybe we could get you, and most certainly we have to have you on as a guest spot on another episode. Perhaps even in the studio as we were talking about. So, Dr. Navab, thank you once again. Any closing thoughts?
I just wanted to say I really appreciate your insight and just your very thoughtful responses, your very philosophical responses. It's nice to hear it from that perspective rather than, this is what you need to do to get into med school, this is what you need to do to be a doctor. You think about it in a very different way, from a different perspective, which I really appreciated.
Yeah, just to add on to what Nora. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Nora. I'm glad to hear that.
I just wanted to add on to what Nora was saying. I definitely think you did bring in a new perspective, and I know that myself, I definitely resonated with what you were saying, and I know that others who are in the same field, maybe medical field or just in general, also resonate with what you were saying. So thank you so much for coming in.
It's my pleasure. It's really an honor to be able to join you, and I do look forward to coming back, either remotely or very potentially in the studio if you have a chair for me.
Absolutely.
We'll always have a chair for you.
Always. You're always welcome.
We'll buy new chairs.
Well, it was great speaking with you, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay. So both the visceral nature of cardiac anesthesiology that draws in a would-be psychiatrist and a very cerebral person. I would consider in that path his thoughtfulness to those answers. That's like a theme across this episode is good, intelligent physicians are, in general, thoughtful people.
Yeah.
We've seen this time and time again.
Yeah.
Right? So the more thought that you put into your decision, of course, like without wasting time, right? And time is our number one most precious commodity. Give yourself the necessary time, push yourself, and qualify that answer between pushing yourself and taking care of yourself. Find something that interests you. So Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Sadaya Danish Jew, and we will see you next time.